interactive fiction is starting to come into people's attention again. And it's not just, oh yeah, I remember those. It's getting people to go, oh, they're still making those. But we still haven't hit like, oh, I can make those. I mean, anyone who is a game author and is interested in games, if you're not writing interactive fiction, I don't know why not. It's so simple. When I was preparing this, there were a number of different ways I wanted to go with this. I wanted to talk about a brief history of interactive fiction. Most people, if they have any awareness, their awareness stops sort of around 1983, starts around 1977 with twisty little passages all alike. It ends with you're standing in front of a White House, there's a troll in the basement that you kill with a sword. Maybe if you're lucky, you might remember Planetfall. Floyd here now, you might remember Deadline, you might remember the Infocom games. If you're British, you might remember a series of games that came out in the United Kingdom. It had tremendously heinous puzzles and so forth. But really, you're probably not aware of anything that's happened since 1994. So what happened was, commercial IF died. It went away. It is no longer, it is an medium. So what happened? It went to hobbyists who kept it alive. It went to people, well, yeah, I'm going to say like me, who always wanted to write interactive fiction. My day job, such as it is as a filmmaker and a writer and an artist, and I learned enough programming to be able to tell interactive stories in the form of these text games. So one of the things about it is it's possible, if you like playing it and you're good at playing it and you're attracted to it, it is absolutely possible for you to write your own. That is one of the extraordinary things about this particular type of computer game. It's within the realm of a fan, a serious fan, an intelligent fan, being able to write their own version of it. It's one of the few computer games, as we know, they're getting larger, they're getting more like movies where you need a whole huge team and millions of dollars and a year and so forth. Well, you still need a year, but it's more like a novelist or a short story writer where you can toil alone for a few months, getting your ideas down, writing code that says when the player does this, when this happens, print this bit of text. That's really all it comes down to. At a certain level, I have always found that the act of writing an interactive fiction game is very close to the act of playing and solving an interactive fiction game. Some of them are more story-like and some are more puzzle-like, and I'm referring to more puzzle-like ones now, because it is a very kind of left-brain activity, trying to, because when you're solving, like, here's a locked door, how do I get it open? But now you're thinking, I want to write a locked door, how do I write how the player goes about opening it? And so you go through a similar process as you're writing it, as playing it, and that's why it tickles the same neurons, and that's why so many people who play interactive fiction get the Jones to write it. And fortunately, we have all these wonderful tools now that let you do so. And so that's what's happened. That's what's happened. Starting in the mid-90s, Graham Nelson from Oxford and environs decided to write a new language that compiled to the Z machine, or the Z machine, as they say over there, that Infocom created, a virtual machine that ran on almost every platform there is, you know, from Texas Instruments, little computers, the TI-99 series, TRS-80s, Apple IIs, IBM PCs, all the way up to Palm Pilots and running in Java and stuff today. So if you have a platform, there is probably a Z machine that runs on it, and if a Z machine runs on it, then it can run all the Infocom games, and it can run all the Inform games, which is the name of Graham Nelson's invention, that compile to it. So Infocom still lives in the form of the virtual machine format that they created. And so that really kicked things off because it was always a nostalgia appeal to be writing text games, even in the 90s. You know, things had moved on to graphics and so forth. So someone coming up with something that let you compile to the exact same format that Infocom used, So if you wrote an Infocom-like game, it was even more like Infocom games. And Graham Nelson launched this with a game he called Curses, and then he followed it up with a game called Jigsaw, and he continues to maintain it, but that's part of a later part of the story. Meanwhile, a man named Michael J. Roberts created and released a shareware language comparable but to writing to its own virtual machine called TADS, Text Adventure Development System, I think it was called. And it was shareware for a while, and that's when I got in on it in the 94, 95, 96, and then later it was freeware, oh well, but that helped get TADS games going in a competition with Inform games. Then what happened was the Usenet community, because that had been around for a while, of course, and Rec Arts int-fiction was where the authors hung out, and then they created Rec Games int-fiction where the players would hang out, and there's a lot of cross-pollination because all of the authors were playing games and some of the players were writing games. And so these two news groups formed the basis of the new community. And so it was a lot of, because Inform and TADS, while they were owned and maintained by their creators and authors, were essentially open source. You could, if you wanted to write a TADS virtual machine that ran on a different platform, Michael J. Roberts was happy to let you do that. You could get the source code, try and figure out how to compile it, get it working, and people could contribute libraries of, well, I wrote a code to do ropes better. It turns out ropes are a very tricky thing to get right. They've got two ends, you can tie one to thing and then walk into another room, how's the room, you know, so, but that gets into the whole world model thing, which is a different part entirely again. So, this is what was going on. A lot of sharing, a lot of passionate discussions virtually late into the night in some ways because it was an international community. There were fans in Europe, there were fans in New York, fans in San Francisco, fans in New Zealand, fans in Australia, fans in Austria of interactive fiction. And they're all talking and they're all bubbling around. Where can this medium go? What can we do to tell greater stories? What tools do we need? What improvements do we need to make to the tools? What have we tried that worked? What have we tried that didn't work? A lot of collaboration. And in addition, there was the creation of a chat room where people could hang out, and this became a more informal thing. But still, there were some late night discussions there too, and a stronger sense of a community being forged and in pursuit of this little niche hobby of keeping these things alive. And out of this community started to come luminaries, and more than one person has likened it to sort of the, I don't know, like the golden age of science fiction, where all these young authors started writing for the pulp magazines and eventually were like giants in the field. They came first, they had these huge ideas, they pushed the things along and laid the groundwork for future authors, and were still standing on their shoulders, and these kinds of people started bubbling up. And me, from my film history background, I think of it as like the first couple of decades of motion pictures, where all of a sudden, it was a brand new medium, but suddenly people who were brilliant at it, brilliant at exploiting it, even when it was just silent movies, all suddenly were on the planet at the same time, getting really excited about the tools and the technology. You know, let me see what this camera does. And suddenly we have Billy Bitzer and D.W. Griffith and Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and all these people suddenly are around all at the same time, taking it for a spin, seeing what this medium can do. And that's what we had happen in the interactive fiction community. And now we've had like 10 years of this, at least seriously, long enough for some of these names to have burbled out into not quite the mainstream, but more of the gaming mainstream, where sites that write about video games are starting to cover the annual interactive fiction competition, where new and old authors compete every year to write a batch of new games, 30 games a year that come out of that. And some of our luminaries are starting to become known names. Adam Kadri, Andrew Zarf Plotkin, Emily Short are starting to get interviewed in game magazines, and they're starting to you know, they keep blogs and people read their blogs about the craft and this. So we're reaching kind of critical mass stage at some level where interactive fiction is starting to come into people's attention again. And it's not just, oh yeah, I remember those. It's getting people to go, oh, they're still making those. And we're hitting that level of awareness, but we still haven't hit like, oh, I can make those, you know. I mean, anyone who is a game author and is interested in games, if you're not writing interactive fiction, I don't know why not, because the tools are all there, the community is all there to back you up, hungry for new voices and new ideas, and it's such a great platform because it's so simple. Like I said earlier, it's what do I have to write? What code do I have to write to make sure that the right bit of text prints at the right time in response to whatever the player has done or has seen? If they pick up the rock and throw it through the window, have I written a thing saying what happens for that? You know, when the villain comes in, have I handled the choices the player is allowed to make then? Do they say something? Do they speak defiantly? Do they speak cowardly? Do they hide? Do they pull out a weapon? What do they do? You know, and you can just sit there and think through all these choices yourself, and if you have enough gumption, you can write them. Because it's really not that tricky. Now, you start getting fancier ideas, you start getting lost in the realm of maybe I need to write a new tool that, or maybe a new library that will help me do the, and you know, that's up to you, because some people, that's fun for them. So, we were actually at a new generation of tools. Graham Nelson came out of what seemed like retirement as he busied himself in his daily life to release, with the help of Emily Short, Inform version 7, which was a radical redesign from the ground up of what Inform should be, what the act of writing interactive fiction should be. Mr. Nelson's, or Dr. Nelson, I guess, his premise was that the ideal language for writing an interactive fiction story is the English language, not code, not pseudocode, but actual English sentences, and setting up rules of behavior. And that comes largely, I think, from Ms. Short's efforts into looking at simulationism rather than strict narrativism. There's a lot of branches of thought going on now, where you set up a world with rules, and so the player can find emergent behavior by playing around with the rules that are set up, rather than the strict one where the author has written everything by hand that is going to happen in the story, and if the author hasn't written it, the player is not going to find it because it's not there. You do tend to get some strong storytelling that way, and so that's why, you know, people like me tend to write things that are a little bit on rails more often than they should. But, you know, if the player starts going along with you, like you're leading them gently in a certain direction, this command is likely to get a good result if you type it. And they go along with it, and then the story it starts to feel effortless. It starts to feel like they are coming up with what they want to do, and it just happens to be happening very smoothly and flowingly, if it works right. Otherwise, you're like trying to guess what the author has written. Something happens here. I have no idea what it is. I'm trying to guess. That's where beta testers are supposed to come in and help solve things. Anyway, so there's Inform 7, and it's got a lot of good things going for it. And meanwhile, Michael J. Roberts came out with the 3rd generation of the TADS game system, complete with a workbench environment for coding in, and it is this massive. It's a fully functioning language. It is huge. It's got an impressive world model. It's got so many things into it, and it's got hooks everywhere for altering it and writing tools in it and doing so many things. It's like, wow, it's got everything I would want here. So the ability to write good stories and fascinating worlds in interactive fiction is still a growing potential. I don't think we've nearly reached it. And some other interesting things are happening. interactive fiction is starting to become recognized and taken somewhat seriously in academia, largely through the efforts of Dr. Nick Montfort at MIT, but it's starting to make inroads. People are starting to teach classes in how to write interactive fiction, getting new people hooked. I mean, I think the ideal age to hook someone on interactive fiction is probably around the age I encountered it, like, 12, 13, 14. And the ideal age to start writing it is when you're about 28, 29, 30, and you can take all those, all the love for this type of game, and now you've got the life experience and the programming experience and the writing experience to really start cranking out some very interesting things. There is a new venture being started by David Cornelson trying to create a company called TextFire, the first commercial company trying to market interactive fiction in the commercial realm for the first time in a long time. But, this is an interesting time, and this is an interesting gaming and storytelling medium, and we've done a lot of work over the past 10 years forming this community, making the tools, writing better games, being very critical within our community as to, is your game any good? Because look at all the great stuff that, Zarf wrote last year. Where's your stuff that's like that? And that's very challenging. We've had a whole generation of really good people just appear. So anyway, that's the state of the art. We've got a lot going on, of course, and it's a good time to be excited about interactive fiction. If you haven't played it in a long time, if you haven't played it since the 1980s, take a look. Here's the better part. All of it's free currently, except for a couple things. The Howard Sherman games, Peter Nepstad's game 1893, which is worth buying. A couple of, apart from that, the tools are free, the games are free. www.ifarchive.org, or go to one of the mirror sites, and anyway, so all the games, they're out there. The reviews that tell you which ones are out there. There's Wikipedia articles by the dozens. There's the IF Wiki, there's the IFDB, there's IFMud, there's Records in Fiction. All these things are out there to tell you. There's brasslantern.org that tell you where the games are, what good games are, BAF's guide. We've got a lot of resources. We put this all together. It's a very handsome little package. Download the games, download the languages, download the tools, see whether you like TADS or Inform or Adrift or Hugo. There's a lot of choices for languages. See which one you like and start writing it. And then when you do it, upload it to the archive, post about it on the news group, let people know. We'll tell you what we think, and trust our opinion, because we've been doing this a long time and we're very good at it, and we're very critical. There's a lot of charges that we're elitist, and we are, and we're proud of that, because it means we're focused on quality. Anyway, I've apparently spoken a little too long, so I need to get going, but thank you very much, and good night. Yeah, thank you. Yes.